Alright, let's look at some different kinds of logical statements, and specifically some derivations of logical statements. And that are the inverse, converse, and contrapositives of a statement, of an if-then statement. So I'm using a little bit of symbolic logic here, and I've translated it into English here. So here's the original statement: if P, then Q. The inverse of that statement would be if not P, then not Q. The converse would be if Q, then P. And the contrapositive would be if not Q, then not P. Alright, let's try that on some actual statements. Okay, here's the Pythagorean theorem. If triangle ABC is a right triangle, then a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay, that's one formulation of the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so I'm just going to label this to help us keep it straight. The first part of it that follows the if, we label P. The second part of it that follows then, we label Q. So this is currently in the form if P, then Q. Okay, the inverse is if not P, then not Q. So that would be if triangle ABC is not a right triangle, then a squared plus b squared is not equal to c squared. Or, if it is not the case that ABC is a right triangle, then it is not the case that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. I'm going to kind of express it a little less formally than that. The converse of the Pythagorean theorem would be if Q, then P. So if a squared plus b squared equals c squared, then triangle ABC is a right triangle. That's the converse. And then the contrapositive is the inverse of the converse. If not Q, then not P. So for the Pythagorean theorem, the contrapositive would be if a squared plus b squared is not c squared, then triangle ABC is not a right triangle, which is true, by the way. Alright, so let's practice one that has nothing to do with math. So if the animal is a crocodile, then it is a reptile. So if P, then Q. True statement. This original statement is a true statement. If the animal is a crocodile, then it is a reptile. Crocodile equals reptile. Alright, so what is the inverse of that statement? The inverse would be if not P, then not Q. So if the animal is not a crocodile, then it is not a reptile. Alright, the inverse of this statement is not true. A turtle is not a crocodile, but it is a reptile. So inverse, false. But doesn't matter if the inverse or converse or contrapositive or true or false. What we're focusing on is the form of the statement. So the inverse of if the animal is a crocodile, then it is a reptile, would be if the animal is not a crocodile, then it is not a reptile. The converse is if Q, then P. So if the animal is a reptile, then it is a crocodile. Okay, also not true. Not necessarily true. So again, the converse would be if Q, then P. So if an animal is a reptile, then it is a crocodile. Not true. A turtle is a reptile, but that doesn't mean it's a crocodile. Alright, finally the contrapositive of the statement would be if not Q, then not P. So it's the inverse of the converse. If not Q, then not P. So if an animal is not a reptile, then it is not a crocodile, which is true. Yeah. So there's some practice with the inverse, converse, and contrapositive of if-then statements. And I wish you all the best when you are converting statements into their inverse or converse or contrapositive. And by the way, why would you need to know this? Because it's important in logic when you're proving things, and sometimes it's easier to prove the contrapositive than the statement itself. For example, sometimes people think that the converse of a statement is automatically true, and you can point out counterexamples like, hey, just because if P then Q, that doesn't mean if Q then P, etc. So, alright, have fun with logic.